All right, everybody, we're getting into HTML and CSS hardcore here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through HTML elements as well as how to use CSS. We'll see how far we get here because we have a couple other lectures like how to use external files and how to use third-party scripts. So we might overlap some of that conversation. And if we do, I'll probably elaborate more on those lectures. But for today, our focus is HTML and CSS. So by now you have either attempted your Hello World assignment or you're playing around with it right now. Well, for this purpose and from here on out, we're going to use a crazy tool called a boilerplate. Now, what a boilerplate is, it's an old school term when in the manufacturing world, when you had a specific apparatus that you had to make over and over and over again, you made a plate for it. An example of that is boilers. Boilers had plates that were put on the front of them, and they were always the same size, same dimensions, and so they made a template to make those plates over and over again. We have access to what's called an HTML5 boilerplate. If you go out and Google HTML5 boilerplate, you're going to find it. I have no problem from here on out. If you want to use that as a starting block, feel free to. I use it because it has everything organized for you already. It gets you started with your HTML template. It also gets you started with some CSS resets and some templates for that. Excuse me. So let's walk through this. This here is a little bit more detailed than what your Hello World assignment is. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just walk through what we're looking at right now. So let's start at the top. We have a tag or we have a HTML tag called doc type. And this doc type is used by browsers to signify what type of file we're looking at. This is obviously an HTML file, so the doc type is set to HTML. Immediately after that, we have our first major tag, and that's our HTML tag. And you'll see it's also the first tag that has both an open tag and a closing tag. Then within this, we have a couple of attributes. We have what's called a class attribute and then a language attribute. For HTML, and for what our purposes are for this class, you're not going to have to worry about adding classes to your HTML or defining the language. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take these out. So now we have just our HTML tag. Then we have a space that doesn't need to be there. We have our head tag. In every single HTML document, there are some consistencies that you're going to see over and over again. You're always going to have a doc type. You're always going to have an HTML tag. You're always going to have a head tag a head tag at the top and then a body tag. Within the head tag, we define what's called metadata as well as auxiliary information. In the body tag, we define content and elements surrounding content. We also define auxiliary scripts and information, and we'll talk about what that is. But first, let's start with the head. It's at the top. The first thing you see is a meta tag that defines a character set. This is simply telling the browser what type of character set we're going to use. UTF-8 is a standard character set used in the United States. If this was another country or we were doing another language, we might be utilizing a different character set because we want to match the character set with the user's language, and that way it'll be interpreted correctly within the browser. If there's anything that's interactive within the page, it will be interpreted correctly through the keyboard. For our purposes, UTF-8 is what we'll be using, and it's declared through this character set within a meta tag. Next thing we have is a title. What is the title? Is the title of our website? Is the title of the page? This title defines what the tab says within the browser. So if we were doing a landing page for a company, we might say something like Acme Industries United. I don't know, I just made that up. And that's what will show up in the actual tab of the browser. It's key to understand that this title, it can be one of two things. It could be the same throughout a website, or you could change the title tag to reflect the page and the content that you're on. For example, if I was Acme Industry United and this was the home page, having it say Acme Industries United is totally fine. But if this was the contact page, I could have it say something like Contact Acme Industries United to define the title to be reflective of what the content is. Next, we have several meta tags. These meta tags are actually used in, well, let's rearrange this. So let's talk about this one first. Bam, bam. All right, so from here on out, we're going to be talking about responsive design. And to get responsive design, you need to declare this viewport. So responsive design is designing your project so that it works in any device: phone, tablet, desktop, laptop, your mom's refrigerator, TV screen. Responsive design is where we are today. In our previous lecture, we talked about how mobile traffic surpassed desktop traffic within the past 4 years. So on our projects from here on out, we're going to look at how does this look not just in a desktop, but how does it look in small screens, medium screens, and so on. To do that, you have to declare the viewport. That's what this meta tag is doing. So in future assignments, I'm going to be looking for this meta tag specifically because this is going to define whether or not it will respond to the device that you're using. The attributes that are in here, one, the viewport, that's what's defining what we're doing. And then the content, you don't need to worry about that part as much as you need to worry about the fact that it needs to be there. What this is doing is this is declaring that the browser is going to match the width and the height to scale of the viewport or the browser window or the device dimensions. That's what we're defining here. Next, we have some meta information that is specific to indexing, SEO, search engine optimization, Facebook, Google, Twitter. This meta information here, when someone shares something on Facebook or someone shares something on Twitter, and you see an image, and sometimes you'll see a URL or you'll see a description of what was shared, guess what? That's where all of that's being pulled from. So if I shared this web page right now on Facebook, well, there's nothing in here, but I had a description on here that said Acme Industries is the best damn company ever. That's what's going to show up as soon as you paste that link into Facebook. If Google is coming here and crawling the site, this description right here is what's going to show up when someone sees this website in Google search results. The title, it can reflect what you have here, or you can have it reflect what the actual page title is. So if this was a blog post and I was writing a blog about, I don't know why I'm on this plumbing kick thing, pipe fitters, and how you needed to have a 3/4 inch, you know, plug into a 1/4 inch pipe. I don't know. We could have the blog post say something like that. So here's the title of the blog post: How to use custom pipe fittings. That might be the actual title of the blog post. And then when this is shared across social media, the internet, and Google, they're going to show this. The convenience of this is you can declare your title different than the title that's actually on the page. And we'll talk about SEO more in another lecture, but this is useful because there's just certain requirements that you need within SEO. For example, descriptions, you don't want them too long. So that's why you can define exactly what your description is. Same with the title, you don't want it too long. Type can be what type of content is going to be on the page, whether it be a FAQ page, a frequently asked questions page, a contact page, or just a general page or post. URL is actually the URL of the page. They use this in meta information because sometimes the URL can vary. Depending on how your website's set up, you may have a really complicated URL, but you don't want that complicated URL to show up in search results or in social media. And so you can put short URLs within here so that when people share the content, they see that URL rather than some long URL with weird information in it. Image, usually it's a featured image, but that's what the image that when you paste something in social media or even when it's indexed, that's the image that comes up. If there's no image defined here, generally Google and sometimes Facebook and Twitter and other social medias, they try to pull up an image that's on the page. The problem with this is that could be any image. That could be an image related to the content that you're sharing, or it could be an image from the sidebar. So we usually try to declare what an actual image is, or what the featured image is. Spoiler alert, I'm going to say that phrase a lot. Content management systems fill all this information in for you. You don't ever have to worry about it. They actually, as you create content and content management systems now, they fill this content in for you. Same with the title tag. But you need to understand what it is and why it's useful. Next, we have some link tags. So link tags can vary. They're not used to define how to link to something. They're actually used to define how to pull information in. This first one, we don't need to worry about. We're going to take that one out. This second one, the Apple Touch icon, and we'll take this one out. It won't delete. This is useful because if you use an Apple device and you want to create a quick link to a web page, that's what this defines. I'm actually going to take this out. I'm going to get to what we're talking about here, and that's the actual style sheets. You have to use link tags to pull in your style sheets, and that's what's happening here. Now, because I'm using a boilerplate, we actually have two style sheets that are coming in. The first one is nice because it's normalizing your content so that no matter what browser you use, whether it be Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Edge, we're going to normalize the content so that it looks the same or close to the same on every single browser. It's often called a reset CSS. This boilerplate calls it normalize. You never touch it. It's great to have. It gives you a starting point to jump off of. Then you have a main CSS. And the main CSS, that's what you use to actually stylize and control the look and feel of the content on your site. We'll go into CSS a little bit more here in just a minute. Then we have another meta tab defining the theme. We don't need that. And the whole reason why I'm removing those is pretty much because we're never going to come across that. Even in what we built out today, that stuff's defined behind the scenes, and we don't need to control or understand why it happens. So that's our head. The next we have our body. And like I said, the body tag, that keeps everything, all your content. Body tags might be a little bit more familiar to you now. We have a lot of more elements within the body tag, but they're usually generally related to the content that you're working with. These scripts we're going to get rid of. We will talk about scripts like third-party scripts in another lecture, but for our purposes, at this point, we're where we were when we created the Hello World project. And at this point, we're ready to actually start building out our pages and working with it. So what I'm going to do in the next lecture is show you how to use CSS within certain elements to apply style.